I got sick again. Oh. Welcome back to the channel, guys. Hope you're all doing really well. And yeah, I got sick again, but you know, it happens. I'll power through, don't worry about it. Today, we have a new review. It is Jeremy Ethier. I believe that's how you pronounce his last name. I had a reviewer correct me for it, and hopefully that's the right way, but who gives a shit? Anyway, we are reviewing his, what is with this hand movement? Anyway, we are reviewing his Intermediate Shred program. I had to think for a second there because I had reviewed his Intermediate Build program actually a while back. You can view that right here, but this time it is his Shred one. So this is a concentration on a lot more on the nutrition side of it. He has an entire section on nutrition, concentrated again on fat loss, but also building muscle in it, and he provides a full-on program to help build that muscle as well. We'll get on all to that. But ultimately, guys, my thoughts are, I thought it was mostly good, what you get, the program and everything else, but there are a few things that I had some caveats for. So we're gonna get into all of that. So when you first sign up for the program, okay, normally in 90% of all these programs that are reviewed, you get like a PDF document that has all the stuff you need, the program and explanations and all that stuff, which I've gone over before with all those previous ones. But in this one, it's actually a little bit different. Instead, you're signing up for essentially a course on the Teachable platform. So it's essentially like you're going through the entire program kind of step by step, which I actually kind of like because then you can go at your own pace, but he provides detailed explanations on almost everything, and it's through all these sections that he provides all those explanations, the FAQs, what you should be learning, the principles, how to follow the program, why he designed it this way, and all that stuff. So I actually kind of like this format. It's very easy to follow, and he provides videos all along the way, or the written part of it if you prefer reading it. So you shouldn't be lost in following this at all. Now, let's go through each of the sections. Before I get to the program itself, I do want to go over each of these sections because I think it's very important. So the first one is just the basic intro on welcoming you. It's not really important. But anyway, the second one, or the first section he calls it, is nutrition. Now, mostly what he said in this section I agree with, but there's still some things here that need to be discussed. The first thing here is he gives you actually a spreadsheet. So you're able to track your entire progress in terms of your diet throughout the entire program, which is great. It's actually really detailed and extensive spreadsheet that you can use. So you type in your weight and the calories that you ate that day and a bunch of other things. It gives you all the calculations, does all the calculations for you, gives you recommendations on the calories you should be eating to reach your goals. So you type in what weight you're trying to reach, and it basically does everything else for you. So you can actually keep track from day to day on your progress, and it actually shows a very detailed graph, so you're able to actually kind of see that all along. I actually really like this spreadsheet, the way that he did it, and the fact that he offered this, a lot of programs don't. So it's almost like he has an app in here included with everything. But having said that, there is one other thing here that I want to mention, is that when providing nutrition advice, it's very important for you to do it if it's in your scope of practice. Okay, now, Jeremy, he does have a degree in exercise science, or I believe it's exercise physiology, if I remember correctly. Now, that does give him some of a background to provide nutrition advice. But the main person who should be giving full-on details with nutrition and a diet plan and recipes and all that is a registered dietitian or an actual nutritionist, which Jeremy is not. Okay, and neither am I. This is out of my scope of practice as well, and it is a bit of out of scope of practice for Jeremy. Now, if he had somebody who's a registered dietitian create this spreadsheet that it provides and all that, then that's another story. Then that's fine, but there's no really indication that that was the case. Okay, so hopefully that is the case, but like I said, there's nothing indicating that it is. So in that case, this is getting a bit of out of practice, or out of scope of practice for Jeremy in this case. Now, like I said, in this nutrition section, there was a good chunk of it that I did agree with, that I think is right in terms of the protein you should be concentrating on, the supplements. He mainly just recommends whey protein isolate. If you can't take that, egg is fine. Or even soy has some research behind it indicating that it can be effective as well. And then the other one being creatine, and that creatine monohydrate is the most well-researched and best form to take. And then he provides a few other supplements that you possibly could take, like omega-3, beta-alanine, a few others. But he ultimately says that you should be getting the majority of your nutrition from your food, from whole food sources, that supplements are really necessary, but they can aid in that. All fine. But, like I said, a little bit out of his scope of practice to be going on to a full-on diet tracker and plan, okay? Really should be left for a registered dietitian. Now, having said that, there is one thing that he mentions in here that I don't really agree with, or like that he mentioned this way. There's one here that he labeled as a diet hack, and he said that it's intermittent fasting, okay? Now, intermittent fasting, I would never label as a diet hack, okay? Because it's not. There's nothing magical about it. Does it work? Yes. Do a lot of people have success with it? Yes, they absolutely do, okay? And that's not what I'm saying. It absolutely can work for various people. But labeling as a diet hack isn't even close to right. The reason that intermittent fasting works is because it restricts your total caloric intake, which is how you lose weight, by reducing your calorie intake. That's how mainly fat loss occurs, okay? And that's what happens under intermittent fasting, okay? You're restricting their total calorie intake to a shorter windows. Now, if you eat 5,000 calories in your shortened window, then in that case, intermittent fasting isn't really going to work for you. In that case, you're actually on the verge of developing binge eating, which is a risk that comes with intermittent fasting. Now, I'm not saying everybody who does it is going to develop binging, not even close, okay? I know there's going to be some people on here who are going to comment saying they've been doing it for years, they never had a problem. Great, that's fine. That's not what I'm saying, okay? A lot of people, like I said, can have success with intermittent fasting, but, okay, there are plenty of people who have developed binge eating because of it, and this is just a risk that some people need to be aware of. But the main thing here is that there's nothing magical about intermittent fasting. It'll work for some people will enjoy it, for others, not so much. And Jeremy does briefly state at the beginning of the section about intermittent fasting that if you don't like it, or you don't enjoy it, or you didn't think it worked for you, then skip it and don't worry about it. But I don't think he really should have mentioned it as a diet hack to begin with at all, okay? The main thing to lose weight is reducing the total calorie intake throughout the day. That's how it works, okay? Now, that briefly sums up the nutrition section. Some things I like, some things I didn't, okay? But like I said, the main thing is that he needs to concentrate and pay attention to his scope of practice. Now let's go on to the training section. This is the next part here. This is where you get into the philosophy of the training and the program itself. Before he gets into the program itself, he does go over some exercise principles. He does mention about progressive overload, the importance of that, the frequency. He does mention some research, specifically from Brad Schoenfeld et al. And a few others. Okay, so that's all great that he cites his work behind it. The principles he mentions are good principles. That's all really good and fine, okay? I don't really have any issues with this section at all. He provides some good detailed FAQs on there, so most of your questions should be answered. You can reach out to him. Chances are he'll be able to answer it as well, and you get access to a Facebook group as well, so you can answer questions there, or you ask questions there as well. So overall, guys, the training part of it and how this all works, I think is actually done fairly well. So let's get into the program itself, okay? So it is a 5-day-a-week program. The way he split it up is that you have an upper-lower day over 2 days. So day 1 is upper, day 2 is lower, then you rest, and then day 4, 5, and 6 is a push-pull legs. And that then accounts for your 5 days throughout the week, okay? Now, this type of split has been done plenty of times. It's a good split to do. Should work for most of you, all right? Not necessarily everybody. Everybody is a little bit different. But in terms of the split itself, it's fine. I actually like the split. I've done it myself, had success, so no issue there. Now, because again, this is a paid program, I can't show you the entire program itself. That's not going to be fair to Jeremy. It's also going to be unethical, copyrights, all that sort of stuff. But I will show you the first upper day to give you an idea of his programming style, and then I'll briefly mention a few other things. So this first day, day one, the upper body day, let's go through it, all right? So the first exercise is bench press. And by the way, this program he has is heavily concentrated around compound movements, mainly 6 ones, the ones that he called the big lifts, all right? So they're the bench press, the deadlift, the squat, all right? Mainly the back squat. He does provide the front squat on another day, but back squat, then overhead pressing, and then a couple other ones. So there's nothing wrong with it. Now, there's nothing wrong with that at all. Okay, like I said, compound movements do work. They're very important, actually. But a lot of people tend to think because it's compound movement, therefore it has to be a barbell movement. Not really true. Barbell movements are also not necessary, okay? I know a lot of people are not going to agree with me on this, okay? But at the end of the day, they're not. It's all dependent on the individual. You can make changes to this, so you're not necessarily doing the bench press or the deadlift or barbell squat. You can tailor it to you so it works for you. Now, he does actually provide a section later on exercise substitutions, which I'm glad that he included. The little issue there, which is not explaining how to make those substitutions or know which ones to necessarily make. He also lists the exercise substitutions. He lists 3 or 4 exercises for each one he provides in the program that you can substitute it with, and he lists them in order that he believes are effective and important. Again, this is going to be dependent on the individual, but other than that, I think it's great that he did include this. But again, compound movements followed then by isolation movements is a good way to make a program, a good way to logically do that order. So not really an issue here, just briefly want to mention again, guys, it's going to be dependent on the individual whether you do a compound movement with a barbell or some other variation. But let's get into this upper day finally here, which is that first exercise is a bench press. He wants 4 sets of 4 to 6 reps. That's fine. He does provide a rest time for each of the exercises, and there is some research indicating what optimal rest times can be, but there's also research suggesting here that it doesn't really matter as much as people might think, or is as important as people might think. Now, if you're doing a heavy compound movement, you're going to need a few minutes, or maybe even more. If you're doing more of an isolation movement, you probably need less. The main point here is to go when you feel like you're ready to go, okay? There's some indication that shorter rest periods can help improve work capacity, but is it really that significantly important? I would argue probably not, okay? But if you wanted to follow the rest times that he includes in here, perfectly fine, all right? So in terms of this first exercise, the sets and reps, I think that's fine. He also provides some notes, and he also provides a video and some pictures demonstrating the technique that he recommends. Now, in terms of the technique that he provides, most of them are fine. There's a few that I would tell you to go check a different person out, mainly like the hip thrust. His hip thrust technique there is okay, but you should check out Brett Contreras. He's the main guy who would tell you exactly how to do the hip thrust correctly. So, but for the most part, the techniques he provides, I think, are fine. So the second exercise is a chest-supported row. So this is 3 sets of 6 to 8. Here, I think this is too low, the volume, all right? So mainly like the rep range. I think that definitely should be higher. Now, he does mention in here in the exercise principles in terms of the rep ranges to follow that optimally you would follow various rep ranges from low end to high end. And that would lead to optimal hypertrophy. There is research certainly suggesting that, and he references that research. Okay, but having said that, even still, pulling movements, you can never really have too much volume, in my opinion, especially if you do a lot of pushing, because if you do a ton of pushing here and not enough pulling, that's going to cause your shoulders to go forward like this. It's just going to cause bad posture issues later on. Okay, there's some people who even suggest, like Dr. John Russin, that for every pushing movement, you should be doing 3 pulling movements, okay? So at the end of the day, you can never have too much volume for pulling, and I think there should be more volume for the pulling movements in this program. The second exercise, or excuse me, the third one is a standing overhead press, all right, 3 sets of 8 to 10. I think that's fine as well. And then lat pull down, 3 sets of 10 to 12. Again, the rep range could be a little bit higher, 12 to 15 should be there, I think. And then high to low cable flies, 3 sets of 12 to 15. The rep range there, I think, is fine. And then lying face pulls, 3 sets of 10 to 12. Again, that one especially should be higher, 12 to 15, maybe even 15 to 20 for that one, because face pulls are vital for your posture and helping any issues you might have with rounding those shoulders forward with all the pushing that you do. This one in particular, lying face pulls, I'm not a fan of, because by doing it lying down against the floor there, you're limiting your range of motion, okay? So that's honestly not a huge fan. Now, later on in another day, in the second in that second pull day that he does, all right, he does have face pulls listed again, but in this case, your standing ups, your back is not against the ground, which is better. Now, a better choice, in my opinion, would be to follow that second one that he does, and then for this one, on this particular day, follow in the style that, say, Mike Israetel does. I think that would be 2 good variations to follow, so you're not necessarily repeating the same thing in the same week, but still getting that full range of motion, the best stimulus out of this exercise. So overall, guys, this gives you an idea of his programming style. All right, those push-pull leg days are obviously programmed a little bit different, okay? Those are concentrated still mainly around the compound movements, but do mix in a little bit more isolation movements, okay? And then the style in this week in particular on the days themselves, as you might see, is a push-pull alternating style. Okay, so bench press, then chestboard row, that's push-pull. All right, standing overhead press, lat pull down, that's push-pull. All right, and then cable flies, face pulls, push-pull. Okay, so this is a staple. That's a good way to do actually programming. You're following like an agonist-antagonist type of style in the programming, and that's the way that I often program a lot of times myself. Okay, so nothing wrong there. So the main thing I see here is that the program itself, the exercise selection is fine, all right, but I just think that the rep ranges need to be tweaked a little bit more, especially on those pulling movements. I think it's just, in my opinion, too low. Okay, and then the lower body day here, similar style, all right, really heavily concentrated around compound movements, all right, nothing wrong with that, okay, but again, there's some things that probably could be tweaked in terms of the rep range. So that gives you guys a pretty good indication of his programming style. Like I said, I can't go into detail about the whole program itself because of copyright and ethical reasons, but that should give you a good idea on how his programming here works. Okay, overall, again, I think it's fine. The rep ranges do need to be tweaked a little bit, the overall volume. And then also some of the exercises I think should be substituted out for a little bit different, like that laying face pull. Not a fan of that one. It does limit your range of motion. Now, one other thing here is that in the training section, he does go over RPE, okay, rate of perceived exertion, and how to help you determine your weight using that. And what he should have done, I think, is in the program itself, you get a PDF copy of the program itself, he should have included the RPE to use for each of the exercises in there. I think that would have been much better for the viewer, for the user. It would have been a little less confusing, because in the section where he explains RPE, he just basically mentions that to follow this, when you're starting the program in that beginning phase there, you should start with an RPE of around 7 to 7.5, and then kind of work your way up. When you're getting later on, you should be approaching around 9 to 10 for that RPE when you're approaching that end of the program, okay? And there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's fine, those recommendations, but he should have included it in the program itself, because a lot of people may not know how to judge or determine which RPE they should be following from week to week and knowing when to progress in that RPE, okay? So they might end up doing a little bit slower than they should be. Some might be rapidly doing it more than they should be, okay? So at that point, they're going to put a much higher RPE earlier on the program than they should be. Again, like I said, he still should have included it in this program itself. But that gives you a really good idea, I think, of how the program itself goes. Now, after that, he does provide some alternating routines. So like if you have a weakness, like your chest is a weakness, or your legs, or mainly your quads are a weakness or stuff, he provides some alternate programs to emphasize those areas. All right, very similar programming style in that. Nothing necessarily wrong, just some rep ranges that need to be tweaked and stuff like that. And then he also provides an extensive tutorial section on each of the exercises. So like I mentioned, throughout the program, you can see him demonstrating the exercises. Okay, so there's an entire section demonstrating each exercise, how to perform them. So you shouldn't be left guessing on that either. But like I said, there's some that I think his technique could be done a little bit better. All right, so that's just something to keep in mind. He does go into a few other sections after that, like what are the next steps, what if you want to do a mini cut, or if you wanted a bulking phase or stuff like that. Again, just pay attention to that a little bit. It's a little bit out of his scope of practice, I think. Okay, not necessarily that the information is wrong, just just need to pay attention to a little bit. If you want advice, my recommendation for bulking or doing a mini cut or stuff like that, Mike Ersatel, the Renaissance Periodization channel, provides all videos about that. For Dr. Mike, that is in his scope of practice. Okay, Martin McDonald, mainly on Instagram, he provides information about that stuff as well. That's definitely in his scope of practice. He is a full-on nutritionist, a very, very smart one, so I recommend following him for that. So overall, guys, that gives you an idea of the program, what you're going to be getting from Jeremy here. Like I said, overall, I did actually like it, what he includes, okay? You're not going to be left guessing at all what you get or how to follow the program itself. The nutrition section, like I said, it needs to be something that is in the scope of practice, but that spreadsheet that he includes is nice for you to track everything. And the information overall is, fine, I think, except for mentioning that the intermittent fasting is a diet hack or something like that. So a couple issues, but nothing super major or anything like that. And then the exercise principles and all that stuff he goes over are perfectly fine. Those are good ones. And then the program itself overall, I think in terms of exercise selection, exercise order, stuff like that, I think is perfectly fine. It's just that there's a couple exercises here that I'm not a huge fan of. And then also the rep ranges need to be changed, especially on those pulling movements. It just, in my opinion, needs to be a higher rep range, maybe even an extra set or two on some of them, just to make sure you're combating any pushing movements that you're doing. All right, guys, so I hope you found that useful. My final score here is going to be an 8 out of 10, okay? Overall good. Just a few things to keep in mind with it. All right, so I hope you guys found that review useful. There's plenty more coming up later on, so I will see you guys next week.